You are listening to the Adapt Performance Podcast, where we aim to make elite level strength and conditioning accessible to everybody. I'm your host, Jordan Webster, and let's get into the episode. What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Adapt Performance Podcast. So in this episode, I'm going to be going through some of the other questions that I got as part of the Q&A box I'll put out on Instagram. I really enjoy doing this because it allows me to actually kind of speak on a topic that is valuable to somebody. And I got some really, really good questions. So I'm just kind of going through them and, a mixture of answering them in the DMs to them, giving them a few voice notes. But, if I could turn this into content, I will turn it into content because I will turn anything into content if it's valuable. So look, I'm going to go through these, and I don't know how long I'll spend on each one, but we've got three that I want to kind of dive into. And look, the first one is going to be a little bit more, I think I might have covered it in the past, so it might be a reminder for some of you. But if you didn't see it, cool. Let's get into it. So is it okay to do conditioning in the same session as strength and power? Long story short, yeah, I do think it's okay. And I do program it that way a lot of times, and I do it myself that way a lot of times. But let's actually kind of dig into it. I think, look, if you had the absolute luxury of being able to train whenever you wanted, whenever you could, and, you didn't have time pressures and you recovered well, do I think it would probably be beneficial for you to separate those sessions and do conditioning in the morning or strength and power in the morning and then the other session in the evening? Probably. I think that'd be worthwhile. I think you'd be able to give it higher intensity to really kind of stimulate the adaptation that we're trying to create. However, not always possible, and sometimes you do have to lump them together in order to get stuff done. And, that's a huge part of what I'm about as a coach and an athlete, and what I try and preach as much as possible is like, it doesn't matter to me if things aren't optimal, right? We're going to try and make it as, efficient and optimal as we can, but optimal kills people sometimes because they focus so much on where these 1% are that they just don't do anything. And I hate that, right? Because that's where I feel like the sports science industry and S&C that's the opposite of what we're supposed to be doing. Like, we're not making people better when we make them obsess over stuff that's, meaningless in a lot of ways. So I do think separating them is going to be the best way. But I do think grouping them is just very fine. Like, you're going to get fitter, you're going to get stronger, you're going to get more powerful. There are some caveats though. Let's kind of chat through those. So look, I think if you're going to do a strength and power session, what I would look to do is do some higher intensity interval training with that. Okay, so I would try and group your strength and power with more HIIT-based conditioning work, or sprint intervals or whatever you're doing. Just because they're similar adaptations in the sense of like high intensity, right? They're going to demand a certain amount of output from you in order for you to get what you want. So it makes sense to group them. I'm okay with you doing more conditioning, like lower intensity stuff at the end of a gym session. And I do program that as well, but it's based on certain scenarios. Like, it might be that I'm really trying to increase the amount of zone 2 work that we get with a specific athlete, and I don't really mind where it goes at this point, and that's fine. But I do think as much as possible, high intensity, go with your strength and power, and if you can keep your more aerobic, your steadier state stuff away from it, that would be my preference. And equally, like you could spend hours in the gym if you kind of tagged on your steady state stuff at the end of a strength and power. So that is the way I'd go for it, and there is bits of research around like the interference effect. And if you're not sure on what that is, the interference effect is essentially the idea or the theory that when you strength train and do power, you're basically flipping a little bit of a switch in the body that stimulates a certain adaptation. When you do longer cardio-based things, you flip the switch in the opposite direction. So you've got like two different pathways that can be active. And the old thought was that it's a pathway or a muscle building pathway, or it's more of an aerobic building pathway. And it really was a switch on, switch off. You're either in mTOR, which is the muscle building pathway, or you're in AMPK, which is more of the endurance side. I think nowadays where people are kind of leaning towards is it's not a switch up and down. It's more of like a dimmer switch, Now, I've definitely spoken about this before because I can remember saying, if you don't know what a dimmer switch is, you're in the same category as me, because I didn't. That's a rich person switch. Like, it's an up and down. That's the only way. But if you ever had friends in school, they had a little bit more money than you, and you went around for tea, and you'd have like your turkey dinosaurs or caviar if you go around to their house, and they had like dimmer switches. I thought, that's wild. I didn't see one until I was like 23. I swear to God. Anyway, so there's the interference effect, and generally it kind of indicates that, yeah, you're not going to get 100% adaptation out of the strength stuff if you then follow it up with a lot of aerobic work. It's going to be minute, and I just wouldn't stress about it. I just think get the sessions done, stack them consistently, keep doing what you need to do over a long period of time. That's going to be the way. I don't see any issue with it, and I do it myself. And like we get amazing results with the athletes that we program this with. So that's what I do. And look, for this, right, send me over your schedule. Send me over the schedule that you've got kind of penciled in, and I'll tell you where I'm kind of at with it, what I would change, what I would keep the same, and tell you if there's a better way. Like, I'm more than happy to do those things. Yeah, that'll be absolutely fine. Sweet. There's your first question. Second one is a little bit more of a coachy based one. So, tips for a coach looking to carve a career in strength and conditioning. Look, like, this for me is, I'll speak on what I've done. I'll speak on what I've seen being done really, really well, and where I feel like the industry kind of is at this point. Okay. I feel like nowadays there are a lot of degrees for strength and conditioning and sports science. So what I did is I did a sports science undergrad, and then I did a sports science masters, and then I did a lot of internships around strength and conditioning. So I've done quite a few internships, and I've clocked up a decent amount of time under experienced coaches. And it's so valuable, right? The mentorships and the internships are so much more impactful to your career and your knowledge base, and actually being able to practically apply that in scenarios than quals, to be honest. You do need quals, and I do think they can really kind of give you a foundation that those other things can build on. But if I had to choose, get under a good like coach, and let's see what they actually do on a day-to-day, right? But the qualifications are really, they're essential in a lot of job applications, and there is like minimum standards, and I get that. So it just depends on what you're trying to do. So what I would look at doing then is genuinely, at any point in your career though, like, mentorships are a game changer. Like, I do mentorships now, because I really want to go deep on certain topics, and I go to the expert and I'm like, right, can I pay you for your time? Sorted. Sometimes they have a course, sometimes it's already pre-laid out, or sometimes it's literally like, can we just grab a coffee and go through that? Can we get on Zoom and do 6 sessions over the next 6 months and do mentorship in that way, and we'll just go back and forth, set me some homework, and we'll go deep. So you should do it, and you're just trying to get as much experience as possible. So you want to get loads of coaching hours as well. Like, this is something I don't feel like I'm seeing it a lot, and I don't know, maybe this is like my bias, but I spent a lot of time on the gym floor. I spent a lot of time working with athletes. Like, at the universities that I was interning with, you are just there all day, every day, and you're coaching constantly. And I think it's such a good thing. Like, don't get me wrong, you get to the end of a shift and you are like emotionally spent, like you're done in, like you've got nothing left to give. And that's not fun, and I can definitely see how some people would burn out with that. And that's cool. Maybe it's just not for you, and you don't want to do those long hours. Like, I don't do those long hours as much anymore. Like, Monday is my long day. It is a killer. I get home and I've just got nothing conversationally for the missus. But I think you need to spend a lot of time coaching, and particularly as people are going more into the private sector nowadays, you just need to make sure that you are practicing your skills and developing your skills on somebody else's time, to be honest with you. Look, you want to try and reverse engineer what your career path is going to be. And you're not going to know exactly what it is. You're not going to be able to connect the dots looking forward and be like, I'm going to do this, then I'll do that, then I'll do that. But you can do your best guess. You can look at like a job advert of a job that you think you would want, whether it's Liverpool FC. I don't follow football, so I ain't got a fucking clue any other clubs. Liverpool FC's, physical prep coach for the first team. What are the requirements? What do they want to see in order for you to have, like, be in a situation to actually be successful at interview? Okay, now reverse that. Okay, if you know you need these quals, you need to go get those quals. If they need to know that you are tech savvy, you have experience with GPS, that you are comfortable rehabbing certain injuries, collaborating with other members of the multidisciplinary team, like it gives you clues of what you need to be working on, and you need to do a little bit of an analysis of your own skill set and your qualifications and be like, do I have those things? No, if you don't have those skill sets and you don't have that knowledge, then go get it. Because you're probably going to have plenty of time to go and get it. So yeah, I think reverse engineer the career path that you want as best as possible. I think networking is a good thing. Networking is a very good thing. I think networking is such a tricky one, because what I don't mean by networking is getting on LinkedIn and being cringe. I genuinely think like the best organic relationships I've had have been when me and other people have been on the same course, or we've trained in the same gym, or we have mutual connections that have kind of introduced us, or things like that. Like a really good example, right? And I don't know if he listens to these or not, but we've got an athlete with us, JB, Jordan Boreal. I say his name wrong. I've known him for a bunch of years. He's JB to me because we can't have two Jordans in the Adapt crew, so I relegated him. I got rid of his name. So JB came to us for coaching. Okay, straight away, super inquisitive, really good, like just a good people person, really like clued up, knows his shit. Okay, came to us for coaching. Jord, can I come shadow you for a little bit? Can I come see what you're doing? I'm like, well, yeah, mate. Like, I'm more than happy to do that, particularly because he's with us as an athlete. Like, he's already kind of found his way in. We're having conversations on a daily basis. Like, so yeah, shadow for a bit. Shadow. I'm like, mate, I need somebody to help me with one of these sessions that I'm doing. Would you mind, coming in and just being another hand on deck, just kind of coach these athletes? And he did. He came in, did some work, and it's like, it makes you sick. Love it. You gradually build up that trust over time. And he's now S&C coach for England boxing, right? And I think about this, and I need to speak to him about it. And I'm like, was this a conscious thing? Like, have you just fully reverse engineered that you wanted a certain role and you've just kind of highlighted us as somebody that has like these connections? Or have you just like, are you just somebody that kind of wants the best out of people? Do you just go to people for coaching? Do you go to people for mentorship? Have you just kind of found yourself here by yourself? Like, so those types of things I think really work. When it comes to coaching and carving out a career in coaching, if you're going to go down the private route, again, I still think you need to collect as many gym hours under somebody else as possible. Marketing is something you're going to need to get good at. Like, ultimately, you can only coach who's in front of you, and if you can't get people in front of you, then you can't coach. Like, and that is where marketing and the business skill set is really important, and you need to work on that, whether you like it or not. If you're going to be in a business, you're in the media business, whether you like it or not. And like I said, skills, courses, mentorships, you need to keep going with that. I genuinely think if you are not consistently upskilling in some way, shape, or form, you're going to get worse, because your memory gets worse. So you're only going to forget stuff. You're only going to forget like different avenues or different tools or like different like methods. You're just going to get more one-track minded with, the stuff that you use more often. So I think that is something I'd definitely recommend, is stay on that. Yeah, there's my thoughts, and it might not be anything groundbreaking for you. I don't think it will be. But I do think networking's a big thing. But don't make it cringe. That's take that away from today. Lovely. Let me have a quick swig of coffee. Okay. It's a good question, right? Yes, guys, what's going on? So before I dive on with the rest of the episode, I wanted to quickly remind you about Adapt's online strength and conditioning service. So if you are an athlete that's got a big performance goal that really makes you excited, or you're struggling with an injury, or your training feels a little bit stale, then give us a shout. So Adapt's mission is to make elite level strength and conditioning accessible to everybody, because we realize that there's a big gap. Like, the people at the top of sport in the performance areas and stuff like that, they get access to high level coaching. But for everyone that's kind of, potentially more amateur or hobbyist, you kind of just stuck following Joe Wicks's hit, 15-minute book, right? And it's just not going to do it for you. So if you really want to kind of unpick performance and make sure that we're, diving into your goals specifically, then give us a shout and we'll make you fitter, faster, stronger, and we'll do everything right. So without further ado, let's get back into the episode. General versus specific training. Discuss. Cool. Right, lay me up for this one. So we've basically got this idea, right, of general physical preparedness, GPP, okay, which is where we're going to train for physical qualities like strength and power and mobility and endurance and aerobic capacity and stuff like that. They are physical qualities that we have, and they are quite general in nature, like you're just going after the actual adaptation. You then have SPP, which is specific prep, right? And what you'll see this being done as more often nowadays is sport-specific exercises, which I'm not a fan of in most scenarios, right? And what that kind of looks like is attaching a band to an exercise to replicate elements of that sporting skill. It might be simulating a fall over on a slide pad so that then you can punch a knee through and pretend like you're trying to recover from a slip step in rugby. Like, there's a lot of those types of things. In jiu-jitsu, it might be you're going to do everything with a gi grip because it simulates the gi, and it's like, there's examples of this in every sport, because unfortunately, what it does is it does a really good job of convincing people that it's sport specific to them, and if people are not as educated in the strength and conditioning realm, they might see that as like, oh, that's really going to help me with this specific thing. It won't. It usually robs you of an opportunity to get better by targeting more of the general physical quality stuff. There are scenarios where sport specific is what we're going after, but it does not look exactly like it does on social media. So going through this, then you've got the general side, you've got the specific side. Two opposites in a lot of ways. I feel like you can generally progressively overload the general stuff really, really well, and you can get better over time, and it's grounded in science and those things. The sport specific side is more marketing, gimmicky, just kind of lacks good question asking and decision making, and yeah, it's not great. So give my actual thoughts, and I kind of just give you a bit there, but so GPP, the general stuff, is gaining a lot of traction at the minute online, right? And it's good. It's good because it's a rival to the sport specificity bullshit. However, I don't think we should go too far with this and think that everybody should train exactly the same. And that is, I'm having conversations with athletes that are a little bit confused by the general stuff when they say, well, I should just train for general physical qualities. So it doesn't really matter that I'm training as a Muay Thai athlete. Should I be training exactly as a rugby player or, a kayaker or a swimmer? And it's like, no, you definitely should be training differently. Like, you're going after general physical qualities 100%. But there needs to be different ratios of what you're going after. And your structure is going to look totally different. And what the key performance indicators of your sport are totally different. So as much as going after general physical qualities is the play, and you probably want to be doing that, it needs to still be individualized. It still needs to be specific. And there still needs to be like greater thought and questions that needs to be asked, in my opinion. And I think probably in a lot of people's opinion as well. So it should be different. Like, a grappler, a sprinter, a swimmer, and somebody that plays rugby. Yeah, I quite like the idea of everybody being an all-rounder and doing a bit of power, doing a bit of strength, doing a bit of like building muscle, bit of mobility and aerobic work, just to make sure that they don't have any gaps. That's kind of what I want from everybody. However, everybody will have certain priorities within that. So a grappler might do way more strength than a sprinter. A sprinter might do way more power than a swimmer. A swimmer is going to do way more than way more upper body and kind of shoulder rehabby based things than, a hockey athlete. So general, yes. Training the same as everybody else, no. And like, they are different things. And I can understand how the language of general physical qualities can be quite confusing and just make it seem like it's just non-specific. It is specific, but it's not attaching a band to an exercise and saying it's going to replicate your slap shot, right? So yeah, I think with this, be careful. you don't want to go too far down the sports specificity route, but equally you don't just want to train like everybody else either. Like, I do think just putting your eggs in the basket of trying to get powerful, strong, and fit is going to be the case. And in my last episode, I kind of gave a little bit of a recipe guide of like, this is how you would get strong. These are the sets and reps. This is how you get strong, powerful. These are the sets and reps. Like, stick to those and adjust them and that type of thing. Like sports, like true sports specificity for me is like, let's look at what the research says around certain elements of the sport. So let's take boxing, right? Well, we know from boxing that we are looking for good lower body strength, good lower body power. We're wanting a good reactivity through the ankles, okay? Like plyometric ability through the ankles, which is going to help transfer a force all the way through the chain up into the punch. Okay, we know this from research because we see it. Okay, so we want to spend time making sure that we 100% develop those qualities because we see it as like a key performance indicator. We see it as a priority for a lot of boxers. Okay, cool, we've got that. You would lose that. You would lose that focus point because if you didn't ask those questions around, well, what are these important parts of the sport? And you just decided to train generally, and you just decided to do a squat, a hinge, a push, a pull, a bit of conditioning. Like, that stuff is great, but it's not where you're trying to be. So yeah, I think you've got to ask the deeper questions of like, what does it take to be successful in this sport, and lean into those things. And I think that's really important. And this is, to me, this is some of the problems with social media because you kind of have like a little bit of a motto. You see the people that are saying certain things and they have like a little bit of a catchphrase. You can see they have an angle, they have a marketing play, and I'm all for it, right? That they have a bias. But sometimes when you have a bias and you really have to commit to that bias, you don't have time for saying, well, you want to train generally, but you actually want to make sure that you are digging deep into the sport and training specifically for the qualities that you've got there. Like, it's really important. So there's my thoughts. GPP, good. Sport-specific exercises, there are good examples. You know what? Like, a good example of like sport-specific training is trying to match the joint angle sometimes. So if we take a sprinter, okay, and we're trying to improve their acceleration and we're trying to get them really good at exploding out of the blocks. What we could look at doing is, okay, well, what are the joint angles of exploding out of the box? I can't even say it. Exploding out of the blocks. Okay, well, we know what the joint angles we're looking for because you'll see, similarities in a lot of the top sprinters, and we might have to apply it to you and your body shape and size and stuff like that. But we're probably going to end up with, I don't know, 90 degrees and 135 degrees, both legs. Perfect. We've now got something to work on. So that is our start position. Now let's look at, okay, well, what is the actual muscle action? Okay, what are we doing? Is there an eccentric and then a concentric? Or is it pure concentric? Am I having to hold my body weight for a long period of time and then explode? Is it purely isometric in nature? Okay, well, it's concentric, that first bit. Okay, exploding out and really kind of jumping out of the block. Cool, we've got that. So you might, from that little element, you might be like, well, you know what? Sleds, heavy sleds or resisted sleds could be a really good option for that. Maybe it is a power runner, which is it looks like a glute kickback machine. We've got one at the EIS gym, but essentially it is like you're exploding out the blocks. You're basically like kicking a load of weight behind you. It's a really good machine. So that would be like a really kind of sport specific exercise for every specific skill. But if we look at this is another one, right? You look at certain look at different sports. So sprinting, the running down the track, okay? It is, I know they say it's like you're running different races within one race, okay? It's the first person to be able to accelerate well. Then it's to have the transition phase and get into max velocity. Like, there are different components and there's different muscle actions, there's different joint angles, there's different postures that are associated with different parts of the race, but it's sprinting, okay? And yeah, you're going to break that down into different KPIs and reactiveness and what's actually happening. But he's sprinting. So you could probably go pretty bloody deep in terms of being very specific in what you're trying to change there. And I think that would be quite reasonable, okay? And it's a stopwatch sport where, you know what, you've got a very clear idea of the variables that are really important. You can work out time, you've got velocity, you've got time to max velocity, you've got the amount of force that you can generate in the first couple of steps. You could set up opso jumps and timers so that you can see how quick they're getting off the ground. Like, you can attack that. Try and do that in a sport like jiu-jitsu, where there are 1,000,001 different positions. So for you to say, oh, I'm going to do this to improve insert position where you've got your head like, or your legs by your head, it just makes no sense. The same thing in like rugby is another one where it's kind of this middle ground, because sprinting super important. So we can take some of the things that we learned from track and apply that. Okay. Joint angles really good because we know that. You look at something like a scrum. Okay. Well, we know joint angles. We know that's a really important part. We know that's a KPI for a lot of the front row, and to be able to make sure that they can express force isometrically and really kind of drive through that. Okay. Those are examples of where I feel like sport specific exercises are good. But what it's not is fucking, I'm sorry, I swore. I've probably swore a lot anyway. I don't know why I'm apologizing. It's not attaching bands to shit. It's not trying to replicate one specific movement that might happen once in a blue moon, because those usually don't have much substance and you can't progressively overload them. You can't stimulate adaptation that actually changes something. That's another one. Like, it's so tricky. It's so tricky. And I really do. It's confusing for people, and I get it. Like, it's a marketing thing more than anything. But anyway, right. Okay. There's my questions for today. Okay. What I covered there. I went through tips for coaching, coaches trying to carve out a career in S&C, strength and power in the same session as conditioning, and general and physical training. How does that work? Cool, guys. If you enjoyed the episode, let me know. If you didn't enjoy the episode, also let me know. If you want to share this with a pal, share it with a pal. And yeah, like, if you are ever interested in S&C coaching, where we're, really going to try and improve your performance to the best of our ability and make sure that we're asking good, solid questions to unpick performance, not just going to give you bollocks templates, then give us a shout. We don't always have capacity, but we do put you on a waiting list, and then you're essentially like first, second, third in that list. And, we do try and help as best as possible. All right, cool. If you've got any questions, give me a shout and I'll speak to you soon. Okay, that is the end of today's episode, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If you did, please do let us know, and then share it with somebody who may find this episode interesting. Okay, see you next time. Cheers.